Luke Cook, welcome back. What's going on?
I'm so happy to be here, Max.
So happy to have you.
I feel like in the last month, so much has happened in the health space.
Crazy, right?
Even like up to the political level, it has gone nuts. I feel like thanks to people like Callie Means and Casey Means, there's a mainstream understanding that, oh, there's something really wrong going on. And then Time Magazine are straight up lying to people. And everyone's kind of like, wait, what's going on here? And Time Magazine is walking it back. So back in January 2023, they published an article that said why ultra-processed foods are so bad. They listed all the reasons. Last week, they wrote, maybe the headline was, maybe ultra foods, what if ultra-processed foods aren't that bad for you? It's like, well, okay. So all of the furor online was, what the hell are you talking about? Back in January 2023, you said this, and now you're saying that. And we all know that ultra-processed foods are the reason, or part of the reason, for the chronic disease crisis. And obesity is through the roof, and we all know it. Then Time walked their article back and said why one dietitian is speaking up for ultra-processed foods. My favorite thing about that is that there's only one dietitian speaking up for ultra-processed
Just
foods.
one.
They couldn't get two. They said like a group of dietitians are speaking up for ultra-processed foods, just one. And it's an interesting article. Did you get a chance to read the whole thing?
I did, yeah. Interesting indeed.
Okay. Yeah, so it's based off the reaction of one dietitian to a book by Dr. Chris Van Tulken, who did a book called Ultra-Processed People. For a month while writing the book, he ate nothing but 80% ultra-processed foods, which is the standard American diet, and found that his hormones went crazy. He put on weight. He felt like hell. And and his brain had MRI scans that showed changes to his brain just from eating 80-20 ultra-processed foods.
Wow.
And then this dietitian, who was upset about the fact that he'd got so much airtime about this book, went about doing the same experiment. She wanted to eat an 80-20 ultra-processed foods diet for a month. And this is what I'll quote from the article because I found it very funny. A weird thing happened. She found that she had more energy and less anxiety. She didn't need as much coffee to get through the day and felt more motivated. She felt better eating an ultra-processed food diet than she had before, a change she attributes to taking in more calories by eating full meals instead of haphazard combinations of whole food ingredients. Haphazard?
Yeah.
Is that what my meals are?
Yeah. Just haphazard
combinations of whole foods.
Yeah.
But what I loved about her evidence is I felt really great, whereas he put on weight, had MRI scans, showed his hormones going crazy, in marked data. And she was just, I think I feel really good. It's like, well, that's not data.
Maybe she was starving herself beforehand. You never know. I mean,
Right.
there is research that suggests, or that has shown, that there's a disproportionate amount of disordered eating risk factors and overt disordered eating amongst dietetic students. So, I mean, you never know. I mean, this person could have been prone to eating disorder. She could have been under eating because she says right there that she was consuming more calories, which she attributes to the increase in energy.
Yeah. And also what happens to your hormones when you do go into a calorie deficit, it can tank testosterone, which is why these guys who are really smart about when they go into a cut, like, may take testosterone in order to make up for that difference.
Yeah.
So a calorie deficit can also not be great for hormone levels.
What do you think about a dietitian today acting as an apologist for ultra-processed foods when we've seen so many chronic health conditions linked to their consumption? I mean, there was a review that found dozens of negative health outcomes linked to ultra-processed food consumption. They didn't find a single benefit of ultra-processed food consumption. All bad. It was all bad.
Yeah. I don't think that that's her problem. She's not coming out and saying that ultra-processed foods are good. She's saying that they're all that some people have, and we shouldn't shame those people. But the interesting thing about presenting data and evidence is going, how it makes people feel is secondary. The data is still the same. Ultra-processed foods are bad. And she goes, please don't shame people who can only buy those foods, who can only afford those foods, which I think is understandable. But if you feel shame that you can only afford ultra-processed foods, there's two things to keep in mind. Is that actually the case, that you can only afford ultra-processed foods? And also, you shouldn't feel shame for essentially a system that has pushed you in that direction, where it is cheaper to buy, for instance, a bottle of Coke than water.
Yeah.
What system are we living in where, strawberry jam without sugar is more expensive than strawberry jam with sugar. You know, you go to the supermarket is full of examples like this.
Yeah, it's odd that we live in a world where you do oftentimes have to pay extra in order to not be poisoned by industrial additives.
Yeah,
You know,
I agree.
it is a big problem. I found one of the things that I found most confusing about the article was that it moved the goalpost in like a few times throughout the article where, you know, it starts talking about ultra processed foods and then it then begins to talk about the continuum of processing that exists today in the food supply. And then it starts talking about the value of processed foods like canned foods and canned fish and things like that. And it almost makes a straw man argument as if those are the kinds of foods that we're talking about when we're talking about ultra processed foods. But those are not ultra processed foods, for one. And we're not talking about those foods. I mean, I think most people would agree that canned foods are okay. Frozen foods are okay. There is a degree of processing that's totally fine. It's the ultra processed foods that tend to be the most pernicious, but also that even under that bucket, there are some ultra processed foods that are likely better for you than others. We don't have the data. Like right now, the data is very low resolution. You know, what we do see with certainty is that ultra processed foods are linked to all these negative health outcomes, and I think more research needs to be done to show specifically what sorts of foods, you know, are most closely linked to these negative health outcomes. And I think the data is starting to show is that it tends to be mostly sugar sweetened beverages, processed meat, which I think is generally just a proxy for somebody who eats a lot of fast food and stuff like that. But all that being said, you know, ultra processed foods are, you know, foods that you couldn't conceivably make in your own kitchen likely are not, regardless of where they come from, are likely inferior to minimally processed foods, whole foods.
Yeah, and they offer no real nutrients.
Yeah.
You know, I think that there is a difference between, because, you know, let's consider that a lot of the supplements that we take are totally ultra processed foods.
Yeah.
And we take them all the time. I took a gander down this dietitian's Instagram and I found her to be more of an activist than a dietitian. She's not encouraging people to eat food necessarily that's good for them. She's more rallying for people who are underprivileged.
She was apparently obsessed with these Costco pupusas. What the hell are those?
Oh, I don't know about the Costco ones, but pupusas are delicious. They're like a dough with stuff put inside.
Huh.
She also has this thing called ultra processed Fridays, which is like a meatless Mondays. But it's like you only eat ultra processed foods on Fridays.
That's so weird.
She loves it. She absolutely loves it. But one thing she was talking about was she was calling out an influencer who pushes a whole food diet and saying, but you take AG1, whey protein isolate, Element she called out, and it's like, these are all ultra processed. And it's like, well, they're a supplement, number one. Like it's not a meal of food. It's a supplement in order to increase your nutrition in one particular area. So, for instance, Element would be electrolytes or sodium, increasing that. You know, something that you don't get if you have mainly a whole food diet.
They also provide no calories, though.
Right.
And one of the, I think, biggest issues with ultra processed foods is that they drive you to overconsume them, and they're therefore at the foundation of the obesity epidemic.
Right.
Which is out of control today. I mean,
right.
Today, 1 in 2 people essentially are not just overweight, but obese. I mean, it's like 40% today. By the year 2030, it's going to be 1 in 2.
Yeah. Well, 40%.
Element has no
kids.
Calories. AG1 has no calories.
Yeah.
Supplements have no calories.
Yep.
You know?
Yep. I think it's 40% of kids are obese in the US, which is, wild.
That's
and we
wild.
need to actively do something about that. And it seems like ultra processed foods are more, or at least dietarily, that's what we have to look at. Enemy of the state number one, as far as what we eat, has to be ultra processed foods.
If you are assessing an ultra processed food, how do you assess it? Or do you take like a 90-10, 80-20 approach where 10 to 20% of the foods that you eat are, a free-for-all, or even among ultra processed foods, when you do choose to have a fun food and an indulgence food, are there any is there any assessment that food undergoes before you choose to eat it?
I mean, I think you can have an ultra processed food that's like a lesser of two evils in many ways. So for instance, if you choose an ice cream, you can go for a cream that is iced, that has a sweetener in it, like a sugar. And it's like, well, this is better than I look at an ingredients list of a Breyers, for instance, and I'm like, this is unrecognizable to ice cream. There's 30 ingredients in here. It's literally cream that is frozen, and maybe you put a little bit of extra in it of some things to make sure that it doesn't freeze completely so that you can scoop it, right? Yeah. And so that's what I look for in ultra-processed foods, or when I'm having fun. It's like, well, can I have as much fun in a smarter way so that I'm not, it's not mystery food.
Yeah.
Like we know what's in that.
Yeah.
Salt and Straw down the road from us, the ice cream place, it's like 70% butterfat. It's like the fattiest, creamiest. It's just cream and sugar and a flavoring.
Pretty much like ice cream as we've been making it for centuries.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I'll be more akin to choose something like that. In saying that, when I have fun, I have fun. It's like, if I'm at a party and we're all eating and it's like, I'm not going to look at the ingredients packet of this bowl of chips.
Yeah.
Like I'm not going to ask for I'm just like, let's just have fun.
Yeah.
Because there probably is an 80-20 rule. So, it's funny, the standard American diet is 80% ultra processed foods. And I think that an 80-20 of the opposite is probably the best, is, 80% whole foods.
Yeah.
And then 20%, ultra processed foods, maybe.
I mean, there is truth to the notion that you can, if 10% of your diet is abject junk, you're probably still going to fare way better than your average person today, health-wise.
Yeah.
Who's consuming upwards of 60% ultra-processed foods. If 10% of your diet is Doritos and Twinkies and things like that.
Have you seen some of these influencers go to McDonald's and order a meal for two? And it's $32 nowadays?
No.
They'll go, okay, I'm going to get what should I get? And the guy's like, I don't know, get a Big Mac meal. And he's like, okay, and I'll have it, with the fries and the Coke, and I have one for my friend. It's like $32. And he's like, okay, I'm going to go and cook a Whole Foods meal for $30 at Whole Foods. And they'll actually go to a Whole Foods and they'll buy, ground beef, which is on sale, an avocado. They'll cook the ground beef in bacon fat, and then put some greens that are like, pesticide free on top of it with some cheese. And it's like, under $30, it's like $24.
Sounds pretty good.
Sounds delicious. That's what I eat.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if it's true that it's cheaper to eat ultra processed. I just wonder if people have been educated to eat ultra processed and that's just their go-to and they wouldn't know where else to go. And also ultra processed is akin to convenience. Like it's like, I don't have to cook this and I don't know how to cook. So maybe learning to cook is actually a way into eating Whole Foods again.
Yeah. I posted recently because somebody asked, I did a Q&A on Instagram and somebody was on like a really low budget. How do I eat healthy on a low budget? And I said, well, there are a few ways to do it. You can buy ground beef, which is super economical, buy eggs, legumes. You can buy frozen, you can buy canned. I think frozen is often more nutritious than fresh sometimes because it's flash frozen at the point of picking. So it's like at peak ripeness. You can buy in bulk. You can buy seasonally. You can meal prep. Meal prepping is a great way to economize. So I think there's a lot of ways that you can buy primarily whole foods on a budget.
Yeah.
You can buy cheaper cuts of meat and just learn how to cook them. Sometimes the cheapest cuts of meat, they're cheap because they're not as easy to cook. Like they're not like a steak necessarily that you just throw on the pan. They're more collagenous, and so they benefit from slower cooking methods. But they can be delicious, like brisket and chuck steak and things like that.
Most stew meat that you buy from the store can come from anywhere, but it mostly comes from like chuck, which is like the meatiest part of the beef. But it's because, like you said, so collagenous. It's like a meeting of many different muscles. So if you cut it up and then you cook it slowly. So first you sear it. You want to create a great sear, and then you fill that up with water and a whole bunch of seasoning, and then you put a top on it, leave it alone for 3 hours, come back. That is like delicious and easy as anything to eat.
So good.
I like to put canned tomatoes on top of that. And I like to sometimes cook it in bone broth or, chicken broth or whatever I can get my hands on. Couple of bay leaves and make sure the water fully covers it once it's been seared. Leave it alone for 3 hours. And that's how you stew up something that's worth $10.
The other thing about ultra processed foods is that they're addictive. There was an article that looked at the criteria used to basically make the claim that tobacco products are addictive and found that the same exact criteria applied directly to ultra-processed foods, that they're essentially as addictive as tobacco products.
I wonder what makes into tobacco product so addictive? Wouldn't it just be the nicotine and how great it feels to have nicotine in your
like
system?
well, the oral fixation aspect of tobacco products.
They would have to consider that with ultra processed foods is mouthfeel. Like, I've been working on a healthy ice cream, and inulin is a prebiotic fiber that people use for mouthfeel, and I never knew that. But if you want to make a product creamy and feel good, it's weird that this prebiotic fiber is what they do.
Just be careful, because high doses of that stuff
Can
will
make
give you crazy gas.
Yeah, right.
Which is not fun.
Yes. But I saw Poppy recently got in a bit of... They had to take off their gut-friendly... stamp that they used to have on there, because they didn't actually have a lot of the prebiotic fiber that they initially thought, or any to help gut health.
Very low. Yeah, it was like 2 grams or something like that. I just think it's crazy that a soda would make health claims. But again, like, if you're, I feel like any reasonable person would just like look at it as a soda, as an indulgence. I just wish that they hadn't made such bold health claims.
Yeah, and furthermore, a prebiotic isn't like... It shouldn't be the center of your existence. You shouldn't be really thinking about prebiotic fiber. Just eat enough vegetables and you're home free.
Exactly.
Right? You don't really need to supplement, I don't think, with prebiotic fiber. That's my personal opinion.
Yeah. I do want to ask your opinion, though. There was some allegations being made that... So the 2 articles, the first time article came out in 2023, where the headline was "Why Ultra-Processed Foods Are So Bad For You." And then this new take, which came out a couple weeks ago, this year, 2024, what if ultra-processed foods aren't as bad as you think? There were some people in the online community that made the claim that it's because RFK has planted a flag so strongly in opposition to ultra-processed foods and has made fighting the chronic disease epidemic, such a major part of his campaign. And obviously, as we all know, he has recently aligned with Donald Trump, that it has, in a way, politicized the sort of pushback to ultra-processed foods, because it's something that RFK has been so vocal, in opposition to, and now it seems that Trump is sort of, joining in that chorus. Yeah,
it's interesting to think about, but it's like, I think it's disappointing to think, oh, now we're politicizing ultra-processed foods. It's like, we should agree that like this is how we're going to fix it. And the only, as far as people who are like, oh, if RFK is saying it, that it's nonsense. I mean, I just think that the Democrats should come up with a health option as well. Exactly, it's like, okay, so if you guys are going to make America healthy again, maybe we can have our own idea of what that would look like. Right now, and what Harris and Biden have done in their 4 years is to reduce the cost of pharmaceutical drugs for a lot of people. And that's okay, but it's like, it means that it'll be cheaper for you when you are sick, we're going to help you not get sick.
Yeah.
And at the same time as well, I don't want the government telling me how to not get sick. Similar to that. That's because I understand I understand a bit of it. I don't like the idea of government control, is what I'm saying, or the government saying this is how you get healthy.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't know if you know what you're talking about.
It hasn't worked in the past.
Yeah, it hasn't worked in the past. But speaking of RFK, JFK was huge into the health of children, about the health of kids, and making sure that like American kids had a robust health program in their schools, and we could use a bit of that. Given that we have 40% obesity level of kids now. So what are we going to do about that? I just think it's great that there's somebody coming to the forefront and going, hey, there's an issue here. I'd like to do something about it. And the people on the left are going, oh, but you're a conspiracy theorist.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, in this one area, he's definitely not a conspiracy theorist.
Yeah.
And he wants to do something about it. And I think hitting it head on and with ultra-processed foods is a great place to start.
Yeah. Why hasn't the left commented on these issues?
Yeah. Well, I think they pretend that RFK doesn't exist. That's their number one play against him.
And the media loves to call him crazy.
Yep.
And and spread lies about him. And I'm not even like a huge RFK fan. Like I'm not even like political, but I do, the sound bites that I've seen about him, waging a war against ultra-processed foods and these, highly refined, industrialized food-like products that are now dominating the food supply. I mean, I think that's a positive thing.
Yes. And as well as that, he's a healthy person. Like you see him out there doing push-ups and chin-ups, and it's like at his age, I don't even know what he's in his 70s. Like the guy's like killing it.
What a great model.
Yeah, it's worth listening to.
Yeah.
And as well as that, his record on the environment is like, no one has a record that good as far as the environment.
Right.
Like what he did for what's the river in New York? He cleaned that river up.
Hudson River?
The Hudson River.
Yeah.
And turned it into one of the most like vibrant estuaries in the States. That's because of him and the work that he did, suing people for polluting it. So like it's really, people are grasping at straws with the things that they hate him about. They hate him about vaccines, and then they hate him about everything else he talks about. But that's not taking somebody's ideas at what they're worth. It's like, well, you hate him about vaccines, but you like him on the environment and you like him on health. It's like, well, maybe we can talk rather than just calling somebody crazy and a conspiracy theorist.
Yeah.
You know,
Super interesting. Make America healthy again. I mean, I could certainly get behind that.
I can get behind that. I won't wear it with a red hat
Yes.
because it's wrong. The messaging, it gets
might get you in fights, at least here in LA.
might get you in fights. Exactly. I wanted to talk to you about Whole30 coming out and endorsing seed oils, which just seems the opposite of what Whole30 is or was. I didn't even know that Whole30 was this huge brand that labels products now, and you know they release books all the time. I just thought, my friend told me about it years ago. She's like, I'm doing the Whole30, and she was eating nothing but whole foods for 30 days. I was like, oh, that seems good. A little bit restrictive, because she was always going out and going, I can't have anything. I'm Whole30. And then you see this, and then I had a look through their Instagram, and I'm like, oh, this is a brand that's trying to make money.
Yeah. And
then their new rules release, of which they're like, we think carrageenan is all good, and we think that seed oils are all good from their, from reviewing, their robust scientific literature. So they say.
I hate that they did that, because it was a statement without much nuance. It was like, we're giving the green light to all cooking oils in all contexts.
Yeah.
And we know that a lot of the cooking oils in question, when exposed to high heat, they mutate, they become dangerous, they oxidize. There's the generation of these, byproducts of the oxidative process, and so to me it seemed like a cash grab, because in so adopting and essentially giving the green light to these oils, it opens up a ton of new products to wear that Whole30 licensing,
right,
and to apply for the Whole30 license, which is a huge moneymaker for them.
Yeah.
So to me it seemed like a money grab, and also like at this juncture they're gonna make a statement where they've decided that the scientific consensus has exonerated these oils, when the Whole30 itself is not a science-based diet in any sense of the term. I mean, it's just like this highly restrictive elimination diet.
For 30 days, by the way.
For
Whole30,
only 30 days, yeah.
That's the idea of it. Now
Yeah.
people are doing it ongoing, and they're just really going, what if you could do Whole30 forever if we allowed you to do basically anything you want?
It just seems weird that they're like picking and choosing where they align with the quote-unquote science. And to me, it seemed like a way to for me, it was like it seemed to me as if it were doing two things. It was, one, trying to align more closely with establishment norms, and like the establishment today is very much pro seed oils, which this is like beyond even the conversation about whether or not seed oils are truly as bad as everybody has made them out to be. But it seems like that's sort of the establishment position, and so they wanted to align themselves more closely with that for whatever reason, virtue signaling perhaps.
Yeah.
But then also to open themselves up to, all of these potential new licensing deals.
Yeah. And I think, when I saw the post itself, you had to comment rules in order to get the scientific research. They wouldn't post the scientific research for fear of, well, then you could just look at it and number one, it drives engagement if you comment. So if you comment, rules, that drives the engagement of the post, and they'll send you the articles of, whatever it be. Chances are maybe you don't know what you're looking at when you look at those things, and that's been curated to make you think this is good. And I just think, if you believe that this to be true, put out the scientific evidence online so we can all look at it and make our minds up together, rather than I'll DM it to you because I don't want you to, I don't want everyone to see it.
Yeah, exactly. There is, I mean, I think it's an important debate. I mean, I wouldn't shy away from the debate. I think it's this is how science advances. And I think that there have been a lot of claims made about seed oils where the evidence kind of runs short of supporting those claims. And there's a lot of emphasis placed on them sort of in lieu of other aspects of the standard American food environment and lifestyle that are, just as problematic, if not more. And so I think there has been, I think some of the correction has been of value in the sense that, if you replace the fats in your ultra processed foods, that are currently soybean oil, and you replace them with butter, are you going to be better off? I don't think so.
Yeah.
You're still over consuming these junk foods, essentially, these nutrient poor junk foods. So I think a little bit of a correction was necessary. There's not a lot of data that they're, acutely inflammatory. So a lot of people will say inflammatory seed oils, and there are also different types of seed oils. Like seed oils is not a monolith.
Right.
You've got perfectly healthy oils like sesame seed oil, which are a culinary oil. Humans have been using them for hundreds, fats like sesame seed oil for hundreds of years. I think those are totally fine. Even among the refined, bleached, and deodorized seed oils, you have an oil like high oleic sunflower oil, which is fine. It has a fatty acid profile very similar to avocado oil. I think the oils that are in question that I think you're probably better off, avoiding if you can, without driving yourself crazy, are those that are really high in polyunsaturated fats like soybean oil, corn oil, because polyunsaturated fats are the most prone to oxidation, and when extracted from the food matrix and subsequently exposed to high heat, light, oxygen, they begin to oxidize. And so the long-term chronic consumption of these fats, we just don't have really good data.
And so when they oxidize, is that when they become rancid?
Yeah.
Okay. And so you're essentially just consuming a rancid food that is odorless.
Yes.
So it's rancid, but you don't know it.
Yeah, you wouldn't eat an apple if you saw it rotting in front of you, right?
Yep,
You just can't see the rot that's occurring to these oils.
Yeah. Interesting.
But they're essentially going bad. They're oxidizing.
Yeah.
And so you don't want to consume them. A lot of the observational evidence, I think is not exactly trustworthy, although, many in the nutritional orthodoxy will agree with me, but there's a bit of healthy user bias with regard to these oils because they've been marketed for so many decades as healthy. I mean, they literally are adorned by the Red Heart Health logo on them, most of these cooking oils, right? I think the randomized human control trials, they're usually short term. I don't think that they're none of them are very long term. And I think a lot of the benefits that we see are usually when replacing saturated fat with these oils, and the benefits are usually, a reduction in, for example, LDL cholesterol and ApoB. But these oils are never compared to not consuming them at all. They're always compared to saturated fat in isolation. They're never consumed, they're never compared to, well, like, how are these oils compared to not consuming these oils? Or how are these oils compared to consuming, for example, extra virgin olive oil? They're always compared to saturated fats.
Yeah.
So that comparison is also contingent, and the outcomes related to that comparison are contingent on some assumptions that saturated fat is bad, and that that a lowering of LDL cholesterol is good, exclusive to all other variables.
Yeah.
And so I just think, to err on the side of caution, I think it's probably better to minimize your intake of them.
Yeah, and also let's be honest about the usage of those oils. They're almost always in fast food takeaway. Your chips, your fries are always fried in those things.
Yeah,
which they're not supposed to be cooked. They're they're ever present in ultra processed foods, which are heated and cooked. And so if you're and what freak is putting it on a salad? If I come over to your house and you pour canola oil on the salad instead of olive oil, I'll be like, what do you do? Is everything okay?
There's just way more evidence in favor of extra virgin olive oil. If you're going to, and by the way, like adding any fat whatsoever, like, you should be limited, because it's essentially just fat calories. So if you're going to add fat to your diet, it should be extra virgin olive oil without question. There's just so much evidence in favor of extra virgin olive oil. It has a very clear anti-inflammatory effect. We have meta-analyses that show that. It's associated with the Mediterranean dietary pattern, which, even the most orthodox in the world of nutrition and medicine, like, that is the dietary pattern associated with reduced risk for chronic disease. That's most similar to our own dietary pattern here in the U.S. and it's exclusively extra virgin olive oil that they're using. Even if you look at the Mind diet, which is like obviously, my passion is brain health. The Mind diet doesn't make a recommendation for any oil other than extra virgin olive oil. So why are we using these? I just think I think money plays a huge role. But again, like I'm also glad that nuance is being brought to the conversation. You know, it's really the high heat cooking that is, I think, most treacherous, and certain of these oils are not as bad as people say. Like even canola oil, to be honest, is like fairly low relative to soybean oil in these polyunsaturates. It's mostly monounsaturated fat, and it has a small proportion of omega-6 and omega-3 fats.
Wow, Max Lugavere comes out in favor of canola oil.
Definitely not. I don't have any in my
Time
house.
magazine. Are you reading this? You know what? What do you think it is about olive oil? Do you think it's the monounsaturated content, which is a fat that we don't often get a lot of, or do you think it's polyphenol content?
I think it's both. I think it's mostly monounsaturated fat, which is an unsaturated fat, so it's gonna improve lipids compared to saturated fat. So there's that, but it's also chemically a lot more stable of a fatty acid than a polyunsaturated fatty acid, and so it's just not prone to degradation the way these polyunsaturates would be when exposed to heat, oxygen, light, etc. It does have a small proportion of polyunsaturates, but the other benefit of extra virgin olive oil, as you alluded to, is rich in these polyphenol compounds that serve as really powerful antioxidants. So I wouldn't worry about the degradation of the fats in extra virgin olive oil because it's so antioxidant rich.
And you wouldn't worry about cooking it at a high heat either?
I wouldn't. I mean, I wouldn't cook at a high heat, but not because I would be afraid of the chemicals, the fatty acids going rancid, more so that it has a low smoke point.
Yeah.
But I'm not concerned about the chemical, disfigurement of its fatty acids the way I would be, were I to sear a steak, for example, in soybean oil.
Right.
Which I wouldn't do.
Right. I wanted to talk about the Kelsey brothers because these guys they're ripe for a kicking.
Yeah.
And they're very. I couldn't help but read about them and get a little bit upset because I think that the Kelsey brothers are obviously, incredible examples of incredible athletes. They're both incredible athletes and they're amazing, at what they do. However, they've come out and made the Kelsey mix cereal. It's a mix of Cinnamon Toast Crunch, Lucky Charms, and Reese's Puffs. I counted over 80 different ingredients.
Damn.
Including Red 40 in this.
That was recently banned in California.
Oh, really?
I'm pretty sure.
So I can't go and get Kelsey's cereal?
I don't know. I don't know about
Gavin Newsom just cramping my style.
Well, actually, I don't know if the ban has gone into effect yet, but I believe it was recently banned in California.
Interesting.
Yeah, which I think is a solid move.
It's good. I mean, it's banned in Europe, and Red 40 is linked to allergies, migraine, and mental disorders in children. So I think it's best to steer clear of whatever the hell that is. But I just it really upsets me. Is looking through Travis Kelce's Instagram. Of course, I don't follow him. I just had to have a look, and when you go there, you find he's pushing beer, sucralose sweetened energy drink called Accelerator, Subway,
wow,
Uncrustables, and this is just seriously within like few moves. Wingstop, Jim Beam, and it's like, oh really? And now you're doing a crappy cereal.
Damn.
It's like there's a price for this guy. It's like he's there to be bought.
He can be bought.
And I think to a degree, footballers don't have a long shelf life. He may not be able to play for very long. He may get injured this season and never play again. Which so footballers have got to keep in mind, like, hey, I need to make money really quickly. And I just think that you also need to consider, like, what's your effect on the earth? What's your effect on people around you? Kids look up to you like crazy. And this is what you're talking about? Subway, Uncrustables, Red 40, dyed food.
Crazy.
It's just, I'm surprised that they're not more lucid.
Yeah. Now, do you think he has any moral obligation, seeing as how he's not a health influencer? He's just, he's an athlete.
Yep.
Or do you think that there should be a degree of responsibility that he feels to peddling this stuff?
I feel like he has to take responsibility. And, it's like if he came out and if he got into a fight one day, off the field, people would say, what type of example are you setting for young boys when you do that? But it's like, oh, if you eat this food, you know, like Travis Kelce, oh, no issue with that.
Yeah.
It's exactly the same thing. It's a behavior, and he's pushing it and promoting it. If he got into a fight, he wouldn't promote the fight. He'd just get into a fight.
Yeah.
But he's pushing and promoting with his face on the box, this cereal that's terrible for you. By the way, in each serving, 1 whole tablespoon of sugar. Would I sit down with my toddler and give them a tablespoon of sugar at any point?
No.
You know, knowingly do that?
Yeah.
And you have to consider people who aren't considerate of what's on the ingredients and how much sugar is in it when they buy food for their family. There are people who aren't considering these things, and what they go, oh, I trust Trav. He wouldn't do that to me. You know.
When I was growing up, Michael Jordan promoted, he was on the box of, it was like Wheaties or something.
Wheaties was
I mean, as far as like cereals go, ultra processed cereals go.
Yep. I mean, a lot of the icons were on Wheaties.
Yeah.
But that wasn't, I feel like that wasn't a heavily sugared cereal, was it?
Someone
Wheaties?
left a really good comment. I'm going to call out somebody named Seth who left a great comment on my YouTube channel, because I covered this a little bit with Matt Belinsky, who was on the show recently. And his comment was, here, I'm going to read this out loud to you. He said, because I'll just read it. I think you guys... So he said, as a parent, we absolutely hold the ultimate responsibility for what our kids eat, but I disagree that the nutritional research over the past 20 years has translated to common knowledge for the average parent. So basically he's saying that, the parent, like we were saying, Matt Belinsky and I were saying that the parents do have ultimate responsibility when it comes to what children are eating today. But Seth goes on, this YouTube commenter, went on to say, between advertising, government recommendations, and conflicting media coverage of the research, I think a lot of people are genuinely not clear on what is healthy. The FDA includes up to 50 grams of added sugar in a healthy diet. Time magazine, as we just discussed, is publishing articles with titles like, What if ultra-processed foods aren't as bad as you think? Athletes who endorse a sugary cereal marketed for kids absolutely hold some responsibility for the products they stamp their name on. Athletes in particular are looked up to as role models of health, whether deserved or not. The companies themselves are attempting to obscure the truth about the health of their products through government lobbying, misleading research, and marketing campaigns. While we all share the blame for public health, I don't think that we should absolve any of these parties from the part they have played in our health crisis, which I totally agree with.
Yeah.
So, I mean, ultimately parents do have final say, but we also have to have empathy for the parent, for the fact that parents are living in very confusing times.
Very confusing times.
Made only worse by headlines like the Time article that we just talked
And
about.
made only worse by how cheap ultra-processed foods are.
Yeah.
You know, it's like the fact that they are cheap has to be attractive. You have to consider that something is like, wait, how much? Let's just say that's a third of what a child eats in a day, and it costs $3.50. It's like, well, I'd consider that if I was in a position where I was like, oh my gosh, like I need to feed my family, and that right there is cheap, and it's high calories. It'll maybe keep them, fed for a while. We have to consider where people are coming from. Yes, the confusion is one thing, and I think right now the world seems so fast-paced that the confusion is easy to do. It's like Time could just post and run away, and then the next week post another article and run away from that as well.
Yeah. Well, you're a parent. Like, I'm not. So, would you say, are some healthy breakfast options for kids today that are, low cost?
Yeah, we do eggs nearly every day with my sons, and berries. I get my son up, who's 1, very cute. We get up at like 6:30. I carry him out, place him on the kitchen bench, and just pull out berries, and we just eat them. And he just loves to snack on those things. And for some people, they might find this difficult because it's like, my kids don't want to eat good stuff. They want to eat everything bad. And that is absolutely a thing. One thing I say about that is present them with the food and go, this is what's for dinner. And they'll say, I want that over there. It's like, this is what's for dinner. And they're going to maybe miss this meal. They won't get to have it. And they'll learn, like, I need to eat when I have the meal in front of me. No child has done no harm to a child to miss one meal. In fact, even when you present them with a good thing and they don't want it, they won't eat it. Even if they ate it the last night and they loved it. Like, for some reason, today's a different day. My son loves pesto chicken, like loves it. And then some days you'll present it to him and he'll be like, and he pushes it off the table. And, you know, it's a battle. One thing I always do is sometimes we have juice in the house, you know, orange juice or apple juice. I never let them start the day with that. I always make sure that we've eaten something like nourishing beforehand before I give them that big old glucose spike. Because that, you know, I speak personally on this. When I can consume a high sugary food out of nowhere and I get moody later in the day, I'm like, imagine what that would do to a person, you know, a third of my size, even less, you know. So I have to consider that with my sons, and I do consider glucose spikes and go, okay, well, let's eat something fibrous. If I can get some protein and fat into you, that would be a gift and a joy. Like if you're willing to eat like a, you know, a jerky stick and, you know, eggs, like then I win, and then you can have an apple juice and I'm not so worried about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You ever use like protein shakes? Is that something that...
They love smoothies too. Wow. Yeah, berries. And, you know, sometimes Cara puts in, I'm like, darling, have you put creatine? Because it's for her and she shares it with the boys. I go, did you put creatine in that? And she's like, yeah. And I'm like, I don't know about it for kids. And she's like, oh, all right. And so she stopped putting it. I'm like, have it another time. I don't think they need creatine yet. But it's so good to get. So we'll scoop collagen in it, dates, berries, milk, ice, peanut butter, blend that stuff. And what an incredible start to the day that is for kids.
Yeah.
And like it feels like a milkshake.
Yeah.
You know.
Kids can be so picky. I mean, I've got 2 nieces at this point, and I just see how picky they are, and I don't know how I would react.
Yeah.
You know, in that situation.
We have these snack boxes we go out with, you know, that it's like this, you know, 5 things on this side, 5 things on this side. And my wife and my mother-in-law cut up things and put stuff into each of it. Grapes here, peaches here, cheese here, jerky here, you know, puffs, paleo puffs here. And I'm like, if they don't crush life, like given that what we ate when we were kids, like if they don't crush life, they've been eating liver since they were babies. Like they better crush, you know, they've been given every chance, you know?
Yeah. So interesting. Yeah. I don't know. I feel like it's, you know, athletes that come out and endorse these kinds of, or any celebrity that comes out and endorses junk food as if we need to be consuming more junk food than we already are. I just think it's a shame, you know?
It is a shame. And at the same time, money talks. Like it's like everyone needs money. Yeah. Everyone wants money. And, you know, McDonald's and Subway pay a lot of money for you to, you know, for you to give up on your integrity and go and do it.
Yeah.
They pay you in order for you to give up your integrity. That's what they're paying you for.
Yeah.
You know, it's not for a 12-hour day of shooting. It's a lot of money for you to like put your face on something that isn't great for people.
Absolutely. Yeah.
At a time now, I think where people are becoming more aware of how dire this situation actually is. You know, some people consider the biggest issue in America to be racism. And it's like, yeah, well, you won't worry about racism when you're dead or you're sick. You know, maybe the biggest issue is the fact that, like, you know, over 70% of adults in this country are obese. You know, the huge population has pre-diabetes or has type 2 diabetes. Like, these are big issues. You won't worry about those things like, you know, racism or sexism, the patriarchy will not be a problem to you if you're dead, you know, or you're sick. When you're sick, you worry about being sick. You don't worry about anything else. Mm-hmm. And so I think it has to be consideration number one is like, are we going to be healthy? Is our next generation going to be healthy? Like, to me, it's of a number one priority.
Yeah. And you can find ways of working the levers of the system in your favor. I mean, I did a video recently, or I guess it was about a year ago, where I went to a McDonald's drive-thru and I bought 4 burger patties, quarter-pounder burger patties for like $8, and it was something like 80 grams of protein. And I skipped the bun, I skipped all the the add-ons and the sauces and whatever, and it was like 80 grams of super high-quality protein. Maybe not the best quality meat,
sure, but
people alleged that I was like paid by McDonald's, which I absolutely wasn't.
These people are not writing checks. Like, everyone who's like, they're paid off. It's like, they're not writing checks. Like, I wish they were.
It would be illegal for me to not disclose that I was paid by McDonald's, by the way.
There you go. Yeah, I mean, I think that was an interesting thing that you did, and I saw all the comments. We really, like, split some people's heads open. Yeah. They were like, wait, what? But you're absolutely correct. Like, there is a way in which to eat at McDonald's where you're not poisoning yourself.
Yeah.
There's a way.
Yeah, exactly.
I wanted to talk about erythritol because it's interesting. A few years ago, I feel like now, or maybe it was just last year, we were hearing about how erythritol causes heart disease. And erythritol is a 0-calorie sweetener and a sugar substitute that is incredibly cheap. And they've recently done further research showing that it improves your chances of clotting. Just when healthy people consumed 30 grams of erythritol, scientists could detect changes in their blood afterward that showed a higher blood clot risk. It didn't seem to have 10 people in the sugar group and 10 people in the erythritol group. I wondered what you thought about that.
Yeah, I read the study. Obviously the headlines were concerning, but you have to look into the methodology of the study before you jump to conclusions. And what this study found was that when humans were fed high doses, very high doses of erythritol, they saw that levels of erythritol in their blood went up, which you would expect because we fully absorb erythritol. This is one of the reasons why erythritol is so well tolerated, even at high doses from a GI standpoint, unlike other sugar alcohols like sorbitol and maltitol, is that we actually absorb it in the small intestine. So as would be expected, levels in serum went up. But then the whole clotting connection was actually not observed in vivo, meaning it was not observed in people. They took, I believe they took clotting factors like platelets and whatnot out, ex vivo. They took it out of, the subjects, and they exposed them to stimuli in this medium that would otherwise initiate clotting. And they found that in those that had consumed these really high levels of erythritol, there was an increase in clotting factors and what have you. But this was in a petri dish. This wasn't in actual people where there are a lot of other factors.
So they took their blood out of them and then put it in a petri dish and put erythritol in it. And 30 grams is a lot.
It's a lot. Yeah, it's something like it's like 15. I did the math. It's like 15 packets of Truvia, which is like a common, erythritol sweetener. So it's like 15 packets.
Yeah, it's interesting because it does seem like they're coming after erythritol. They really want to find something wrong with it.
Yeah.
And I'm not a huge fan, and by any means I really care. But I'd say surely it would be better than sugar for you. Yeah. If I was to recommend you take erythritol instead of sugar, I'd say erythritol. But it seems to be these people are coming after it in a real way. And every time they release an article about it, everyone who reads the science is like, I don't know about this. I don't think that what they've said is true, that it does increase your chances of heart disease or clotting.
Well, it's like the dose with anything makes the poison. So if you're pounding 15 packets of Truvia or consuming a product that contains that quantity of erythritol in it, why are you consuming that?
Yeah.
What needs to be so heavily sweetened? So I'm certainly not opposed to using it in moderation. I think there's no evidence that in vivo that there's any harm to come from that. Erythritol is actually something that we do produce endogenously, and I believe we produce higher levels of it when under metabolic duress. So I think it is sort of like a proxy indicator of metabolic dysfunction. But that doesn't mean that consuming it is going to cause any downstream problems. We eliminate 99% of it, I believe.
Oh, okay. So we produce it in our bodies when we're under metabolic stress, is that what you're saying? Oh, interesting.
I believe so.
Yeah,
from the last time I checked.
Maybe we'd be delicious.
Yeah, we likely would be.
Yeah, so sweet. I mean, I went to New Zealand and was shopping with my sister-in-law, and she always buys this sugar-free, it would have been $1.50 for this huge orange soda. And I was like, how's it $1.50? And erythritol was the answer. And so it's very cheap.
Yeah, I don't mind it. I'm not against erythritol, but I think in general, it's good to kind of wean yourself off of an addiction to sweet. I think that's probably smart. But when you do choose to indulge, assuming you're not, slamming down 30 grams of this stuff, I think it's likely totally safe.
Yeah.
It's very rapidly eliminated anyway. So I mean, it's a very transient, presence. Its presence in the body is extremely transient.
Yeah. And then what are you up to right now with your health? Are you in a deficit, or are you just maintaining right now? What are you doing with your mass? Are you after the gains?
I'm I think I'm mostly maintaining at this point. Maybe teetering on the brink of a deficit right now, because I was in Vegas for the past 10 days.
And so you need to
eating out a lot. And,
You're always, very hard there.
Yeah, it's very hard. But yeah, I'm not tracking anything. I don't have any real goal. I'm just, trying to maintain. What is the term? I think they said main gaining,
gains,
something like that.
So is it possible to eat the same calories and work out it in such a way that you can increase your gains or your body composition, improve your body composition?
Typically, if you're well trained,
Yep.
like if you've been lifting for a certain number of years, it's less likely to be the case. You generally need to be in a calorie deficit to put on significant muscle.
Calorie surplus. To put on
Calorie
muscle,
surplus,
yeah.
yes, sorry. But there is evidence that you can put on muscle even in a calorie deficit if certain conditions are met. Menno Henselmans has done a great post on this, like on his blog. He cites some really cool evidence, and I know Dr. Mike Israetel has been on the show, has talked about this a bit.
Yep.
You do want to, if you choose to be in a calorie deficit, it should be a slight deficit, and you want to keep your protein intake up.
High,
as long as your protein intake is high.
Yep.
But you're building muscle accrual is an energy expensive process.
Right.
So that's why.
And does a lot of that happen at sleep? Like, is it necessary to have sleep for gains for that reason, or is that just for your mental well-being? I mean, sleep is incredible for mental well-being, but it also seems to be important in the muscle building process.
Yeah, it's both. I mean, it's both. Your training is not going to be optimal if you're not sleeping well, and training is the number one stimulus required to put on muscle. And then you also get that diurnal testosterone spike. You get this like really anabolic surge of hormones early on in sleep.
Yeah. Oh wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, testosterone, growth hormone.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
your calorie deficit post that you do on your newsletter is sensational.
The cheat
weight
codes,
loss, the cheat code,
fat loss cheat codes. Yeah, thank you.
It's very good. Like, people should absolutely hit you up for that. I'm not sure how they can do that, but they should, because I remember reading it and going, "Oh, this is so usable and easy to understand." As well as that, they should listen to your recent podcast with Dr. Mike Israetel on, what is it, stretch? It's not called stretch hypertrophy.
Stretch mediated hypertrophy.
It's not that though, is it? It's something else. But
Yeah.
it's he's saying that, going to the full stretch position during your exercises. So for instance, with a bicep curl, going all the way to the full stretch increases muscle mass more than maybe going in the top half. The bottom half is going to be more useful and effective.
You get more bang for your buck, which is counterintuitive. Because you always tend to think of like the contracted position as being where you want to be.
Yes.
Or spend most of your time. But it's really that sort of eccentric, stretched position where you see the most metabolic stress, and it seems to provide a really potent growth stimulus.
Yeah, ever since finding him on Instagram, I've been using that, and it's incredible. I mean, you feel like you're doing more work. And it's really fun to push yourself to failure at the end of after you're at your fourth set or fifth set.
Yeah.
It's so much fun to see what you can actually do.
Have you put on muscle?
I don't know. I can't tell. I feel like I'm just hanging around the same spot. My wife hasn't said anything. That's usually the marker.
How do you measure your progress? Do you get really granular? Do you do like bioelectrical impedance? Have you ever done a DEXA scan, or is it just like...
I've done the DEXA scan thing, the thing where you stand and you hold the...
Oh, that thing,
tells
yeah.
you. I'm
but
not sure
it's
if that's right.
in body.
In body, that's right. I've done that before. I guess there's no real way to know other than, I look at my shoulders. I look at, like, are they out? Like, I want the boulder shoulders, and if they are, I'm like, oh, I'm working well. Like, everything's happening. But it's really hard to tell unless people tell you, or you see movement on the scales, of which, you see movement on the scales from a high, really high carbohydrate meal, or a really few fatty days, like where you eat a lot of fat. And so it's hard to really take the scale at face value. Sometimes it's off and doesn't make sense, or, as far as how much muscle you actually have.
Yeah.
But speaking of the gym, one last little piece of something. This Instagramming before sets reduces performance. 16 adults of both sexes performed 3 sets of a half back squat exercise to failure, and then they had a 3-minute break, and half of them watched a documentary and half of them were on their smartphones.
Interesting.
And what
a weird study.
I know, it is interesting. So the 30-minute exposure to smartphone social network apps led participants toward increased perception of mental fatigue, as in being on your smartphone made you think that you were more tired than you were, and a decrease in how many reps they could do, resulting in 15% lower volume load.
Wow. I don't know. I'm on my phone pretty much like the whole time I'm in the gym. And I haven't seen any decrement in my in my performance. But
do you write reps down and things like that, or write weight down?
I don't. That's an interesting question. Do you?
I do. I have an app, like my coach sends me workouts and I put in, how much weight I push on any given exercise. It also shows you your exercise history on how much you've lifted in previous weeks. So I always check in, like, am I lifting at a good movement here, or do I need to lift more?
Yeah.
I do write it down, but that means that you just have to be on your phone. That's the issue. Some people write it down in a notebook.
My brother tracks everything, and I have a different perspective on it, which I know a lot of, there are going to be people that disagree with me, but I don't track. And I think that as long as you are giving maximal effort to your lifts and you're taking your last set to failure, to me, it doesn't matter. So the way that you build muscle is via progressive overload, right? And so and progressive overload occurs in many different ways. Progressive overload isn't only adding weight to the bar with every subsequent lift. Progressive overload could be an additional rep.
Yes.
Progressive overload could be an additional set, like increased volume. Progressive overload could be better form.
Yep. Or a lower eccentric, counting
like
to
slower
4
tempo.
instead of 3. Yeah.
Yeah. And so for me, like, it doesn't matter if, for example, if I'm using the chest press machine and the weight that I put it on one week is less weight than the week that I put it on, that I had it on the previous week. For me, as long as I'm doing all the reps of that weight, I might be doing more reps of the lower weight than I was able to do last week on a higher weight. But as long as I'm doing all of the reps that I can do and I'm giving my best effort.
So you are kind of clocking what you're at, though, weight wise. Like, you're clocking how much weight you actually are lifting.
Yeah, generally I have a sense of like where my maximal effort, like what kind of weight range is going to require my maximal effort.
Yes.
And so I kind of put it within that range, but then I just I give it my all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then that's essentially RPE, or what is it?
Reps in reserve, or rate of perceived exertion.
Yeah. So you're kind of working off that, like how much have I got left in me?
Yeah. And at this point, because I've been training for such a long time, I have a sense of when I've got 1 or 2 or 3 reps in reserve, and that's generally where I'll stop for the first 2 or 3 sets.
Yep.
And then generally, like, for the last set or the last 2 sets, I'll take it to failure. And definitely on the last set, usually I'm taking it past failure with lengthened partials.
Oh, nice. Yeah, getting the pulses in there.
Yeah. So as long as I'm giving it my all, it doesn't matter, because the data suggests that it's at the rep range, like, you gain muscle across a very wide rep range. Like, it's a lot wider than was previously thought. We used to think that lower reps led to primarily strength, not as much hypertrophy, and that higher in the rep range you saw fewer strength gains, but that's where you got most of the bang for your buck in terms of hypertrophy or muscle growth. And now I think what we understand is that you gain muscle hypertrophy across the rep range. And my goal is not necessarily I'm already pretty strong. My goal is not to be like a power lifter or anything like that. It really is mainly for health and aesthetics.
Yep.
And so because I know that I'm gaining muscle, or at least preserving muscle, with a fairly wide rep range, it doesn't matter how much weight I'm putting on the bar.
Yeah. There's a guy named Jeff Nippard. I don't know if you've seen him.
I like his content.
Yeah, he's really science-based, always talking about gains. But one thing he says is, if you don't know if this is your last rep, ask yourself, if there was $1 million on the other end of it, could you do it? And I'm like, it's a nice positive way of thinking about it. I've heard terrible things where it's like, there's a gun to your family's head if you don't lift it, things like that. I'm like, if there's $1 million on the other end of it, it's a great way to figure out, can you do one more?
It's a good litmus test, I guess. A bit morose.
Yeah.
Morbid.
Yes.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I'll probably continue to use social media throughout my...
Hard to help it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. What else we got? Are we going to talk about this new study that looked at the top sources of saturated fat and added sugar in the diet?
Yes, stealth saturated fat and sugar sources. I actually didn't get to read this one. You sent it to me 15 minutes before we started.
So I'll break it down. It was a study from Ohio State University that sought to find out the top sources of saturated fat and added sugar in the diet, because the presumption is we tend to overconsume both. And so it was an analysis of data from about 35,000 U.S. adults. And the goal of the project was to help people meet the recommendations of consuming less than 10% of calories from both saturated fat, from both saturated fat and added sugar. And I thought what was really interesting was the list of top, actually less interesting were the top sources of added sugar, because I think that's fairly intuitive. You can guess what the top sources of added sugar are in the standard American diet. It's sugar-sweetened beverages. Fruit juices, soft drinks, sweetened teas, and cakes and pies. Those are the top sources of added sugar in the standard American diet, at least according to these 36,000 people. But it was a 36,000, it was a cohort generally thought to be representative of the U.S. population. But the top sources of saturated fat, I thought, were where the data became interesting. The top sources were cheese, pizza, ice cream, and eggs. And so the one thing that I thought, so just like off the bat, it's interesting that meat was not present. Right? Like red meat, which is often thought of
as the saturated fat.
As like the demon. Saturated fat boogeyman, right?
Right.
Is red meat. Oh my God, we got to reduce our saturated fat intake. We got to cut our consumption of red meat. So red meat was nowhere to be found, at least within the top 4 sources of saturated fat in the standard American diet. It's primarily cheese, pizza, ice cream, and eggs. Now eggs...
They go into baked goods.
Eggs go into baked goods, but that's number 4. And eggs are actually a low saturated fat food. I mean, they have some saturated fat, but eggs generally, the reason why eggs have been demonized for so many decades is not because they're a high saturated fat food, but because the yolks contain dietary cholesterol, right? Which has largely been exonerated. We find that it's not really the risk to our cardiovascular system. In fact, it could be quite a healthy food from a cardiovascular standpoint. But the top 3 sources of saturated fat it's all dairy fat.
Right.
And dairy fat is very interesting. We have studies that show, at the very least, a neutral effect of dairy fat on lipids like LDL cholesterol, and some studies even pointing to a benefit in terms of cardiometabolic health. Like there are large-scale observational studies that show that people who consume more full-fat dairy as opposed to low-fat and fat-free dairy have better cardiovascular health, better health outcomes, and the like. So the question that remains is, if saturated fat is so bad for us, and we're over consuming it, at least according to the recommendations, to consume only 10% of our calories from saturated fat, and that fat is coming from dairy fat, then what's the harm? And so it led to this speculation on my part that the reason why, in my view, we see saturated fat so consistently, but not all the time, but we do generally consistently, we'll see it linked in the epidemiology to poor health outcomes, is because it's likely associated with a junk food diet or just a high calorie diet in general. I mean, because if you're eating lots of pizza, ice cream, and cheese generally, I mean, those are very calorie dense foods. And also the overlap of cheese and pizza. And the overlap of so a milkshake, for instance, that's dairy fat, but it's also sugar. And so how do these dairy fats, how are they overlapped with other things in the diet that make them more, palatable? I doubt that people are just drinking straight up milk for their saturated fat every day. I doubt that people are, just scooping cheese. They're probably putting it on things, buttered bread and cooking it, and, pizza and, Yeah, it's interesting. So you're kind of saying that saturated fat can be a problem dependent on its source. Like if it comes through dairy, it can be better for you than if it just comes from butter, let's just say. Sorry, that would be dairy too. Well, no, but butter is actually different. So it's interesting because dairy fat is bound up into what's called milk fat globule membrane, which studies suggest is actually like it prevents our bodies from actually seeing a negative impact due to, and this might be because dairy is our first food. I mean, breast milk is dairy.
Right.
And if dairy were so bad for our health,
do you consider breast milk dairy?
Breast milk is dairy.
Like from my mom.
Yeah.
Isn't dairy bovine?
Not necessarily. Because you can get dairy, you can get
from any animal.
Goat milk, you can get.
But dairy is any animal, including human.
Mammalian, yeah. Yes.
Okay. Imagine we found out that like the main source of saturated fat was people drinking breast milk all of a sudden. Yeah.
But it's just interesting. So dairy fat is like largely safe. I mean, there is the question of butter. Butter, the churning of butter disrupts the milk fat globule membrane. And so butter might be a unique food from the standpoint of lipids. It might uniquely raise LDL. So, if LDL is like a concern to you, you might want to limit your butter consumption, for example. But dairy has a very high proportion of fats from saturated fatty acids and seems to be neutral from a cardiovascular standpoint. So the fact that these are the top sources of saturated fat in the standard American diet.
And are those globulins in milk fat? That's what you're saying?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So those things are incredible for your immune system. I think they're called immunoglobulins, aren't they? I think also, like lactoferrin and
also great for likely great for brain health as well.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The milk fat it's mostly water, but there's obviously fat in milk. But the reason why the fat doesn't, rise to the top of milk is because it's suspended. It basically, milk fat globule membrane is essentially like these lipoproteins that we have in our blood that keep fat solvent within this aqueous
that's why fat is mixed throughout.
Yeah.
What about cream on top, though? You've seen that, right? So some milks will have cream on top. Some yogurts will have cream on top. I wonder what that's about.
Yeah.
What's the separation of fat there? I know that raw milk, for instance, will have the cream rise to the top.
I think over time it probably just rises, It's probably not that. It's probably meant to be consumed fairly rapidly. I mean, like, think about it. It's like meant to go directly from mammary tissue into a baby's mouth.
Yeah, right.
And then digested. But
and also the way that milk changes in the breast milk, like from the milk that the baby gets at the beginning, like when they start breastfeeding to 10 minutes later when they're still feeding, that milk is different. The colostrum is mostly at the forefront.
Yeah.
And then you get, fat and lactose at the end. But speaking of that, Matt Walsh posted a thing about how disgusting raw dairy is, and you backed him up. You haven't seen evidence that raw dairy is worth it.
Yeah. I'm like neutral to raw dairy, but it's a very polarizing topic. Have you seen this? It's wild to me.
It is interesting how polarizing it is. It can be dangerous when it's produced by idiots,
Yeah.
And so and people have died, literally died in the last 10 years from drinking raw dairy.
Well, my argument is like you wouldn't eat raw meat or raw fish from a supermarket.
Right.
So why are you going to drink raw dairy? If you're getting it directly if you own a cow and you're getting it directly from the cow, have at it. Have a field day.
I mean, I wouldn't trust myself at all to produce milk and then drink it. I'm like, oh my God, what is this?
Yeah, I live in a city. I shop in a supermarket, and I know there's some brands in California available to us, and I've bought raw milk from them, and I've enjoyed it. I'm not anti it.
Yep.
I just think you should use a little bit of common sense. And I also think that there's absolutely nothing wrong with pasteurized dairy.
Yeah.
These raw milk advocates will act as though pasteurized dairy is like a poison. People have literally tweeted back to me, replied back to me saying that there's nothing in pasteurized milk.
Right.
That it's like a nothing food. I'm like,
yes.
Have you heard of protein?
Right.
You know, it's wild.
I think one thing that they claim today, I saw Liv Vitae post about it today, and I know that you've followed him for a while, and so have I. But he posted about how there's no enzymes in pasteurized milk. It kills all enzymes, digestive enzymes.
Okay, well, what if you digest pasteurized dairy fine?
Yeah, but a lot of people don't.
Right, that's true.
What is it? A huge proportion of people can't or have trouble digesting either A2 protein or A1 protein, and lactose.
Now, I don't know if there's any data on this, but if somebody is lactose intolerant and then drinks raw dairy, will they be totally fine? That I don't know.
Interesting.
All I know is my own personal experience. I'm not lactose intolerant, and I handle pasteurized dairy and raw dairy totally fine.
Yeah.
But if people who are lactose intolerant have abject GI distress when consuming pasteurized dairy, but they don't when they consume raw dairy, well then that's very interesting. And that should be studied and I guess
looked into.
Into.
I think that it would be the FDA really hates raw dairy and they wish they could do away with it forever.
That's odd to me. Why?
I don't know, but if you ever meet the people at Raw Farm, they will tell you all about it. They are constantly locked in litigation with the FDA about what they do.
Wild.
They can't travel their milk across state lines. They can't. It would be illegal for them to go into Arizona and sell there. There's a lot of red tape placed on them, and then and again, as I said, people have died from this stuff. So it's it's got to be very careful. I've been to Raw Farm and I've seen the care that they take with their animals. and with their milk. And it is absolutely insane.
Well, apparently,
In a good way.
I don't know this to be fact, but I've heard that they, for example, they will test every batch for the most
Absolutely.
common and dangerous pathogens.
Absolutely.
Like E. coli, salmonella, I don't even know. But
They wash the cows as they come in from the top, from the bottom. They wipe them with a cloth to sanitize, wipe them again, check each teat for mastitis or blood or anything like that. Then they wipe again, then they milk.
Whoa.
I'm like, okay. This seems like something that would be necessary if you want to create a great raw milk product that's as safe as possible. Whenever they find a problem with any of the cows, they pull them out. Like, you're not being milked today. We need to help you. And I'm like, this is good. If I was doing this is how careful I would be. But they're amazing. Like, I was so impressed.
wow.
Yeah. So we drink raw milk from time to time in our house. It's whatever's gettable. If we go to Bristol Farms, we'll get raw milk. If we don't, we'll get just regular
Yeah.
milk. It's no real care to
That's
us.
my stance on it. Like,
Yeah.
it's just that, it's become oddly, I mean, I guess everything's become polarized today, but it's just oddly inflamed, like that debate, which is just crazy. It was like trending on X, like when Matt Walsh posted about it. Yeah. I don't think it's disgusting. I just like, I take a common sense approach. Like, I'm not going to make, carne cruda or beef carpaccio or whatever, beef tartare from meat that I buy from the supermarket. I'm not going to make sashimi from the salmon that's been sitting out at the supermarket.
Yes.
It's like, I just don't know how the dairy, if raw, has been handled where it's been sitting in the supermarket. But yeah, if I had access to a farm and I knew where it was coming from and I knew that they were putting in the care that, raw farms seems to be putting in, then I have nothing against it.
Yes. It's funny that he hasn't such a strong opinion on it, Matt Walsh.
Yeah.
That he's like, it's disgusting, and like went into it. I was like, wow, what a weird guy he is. Like, that he has such opinions about raw milk. You just wouldn't think that he'd know anything about it or give two hoots, but
Wild. Crazy. Damn.
Indeed.
Well, so fun, Luke Cook.
A joy.
Yeah.
Always.
Thanks for coming in.
Pleasure.
Always so fun. Remind people where they can find you on social media. You guys should definitely all go and follow Luke. He's the man. Your content is so funny.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm at the Luke Cook on Instagram and TikTok, and that's it.
That's it. Hey, if you liked that video, you need to check out this one here, and I'll see you there.